Have you ever been really passionate about something only to feel that fire just fizzle out and become a heavy obligation? Well, today we're going to dive into a 2,500-year-old story from the book of Malachi that's all about that exact feeling, when a sacred duty becomes a burden. And what it reveals about our own calling today is honestly pretty radical.
It's a very human question, isn't it? Can the things we're supposed to love doing, whether it's serving God or any other cause, start to feel like a total drag? It's kind of an uncomfortable thought, but the Bible doesn't shy away from it. In fact, it confronts this feeling head on.
And that brings us to our first point, contempt in service. Now, this isn't an accusation aimed at enemies or outsiders. The shocking part is who it's aimed at, the spiritual leaders of the community, the very people who are supposed to be the role models.
So picture this. It's about 2,500 years ago. A prophet named Malachi walks into the temple, but he's not there for a friendly visit. He has a direct and difficult message from God for the priest of Israel, confronting them not just for their actions, but for the very state of their hearts.
And here is the core of his accusation, right from the text. The priests are caught, in their own words, saying, "What a burden." They are literally sniffing at their sacred duties with contempt. That initial spark, that passion, had been extinguished and replaced by this tired sense of obligation. Their service had become a sigh, a chore.
And this is where their inner contempt becomes an outward action. Malachi points out that they're offering blind, lame, and diseased animals. Then he delivers this sharp rhetorical blow. Try offering that to your governor. Would he be pleased with you? You see, in that culture, giving a flawed gift to a superior wasn't as cheap. It was a profound insult. They were giving God the leftovers they would never dare offer a human leader, and in doing so, their actions were screaming what their hearts truly felt.
But to really understand why this was so serious, we have to back up a little. Why were these offerings so important in the first place? What was the whole point of this system?
Well, it boils down to two core ideas. You can think of it as saying sorry and saying thank you. The first part, atonement, was about repairing the relationship with God that had been broken by sin. The second part was pure gratitude, a way to express thanks for all of God's gifts. Every offering was meant to be deeply personal and meaningful.
And the priests stood at the center of all this, with two critical jobs. They were mediators, standing in the gap for the people, but they were also guides, teaching God's law and showing the way to live. By offering cheap sacrifices, they weren't just failing at a ritual. They were failing their entire community on both fronts. This whole situation reveals a fundamental flaw in the system. It relied on imperfect people, and it was always meant to be temporary. But woven throughout the biblical story are hints of a permanent solution, a new and eternal kind of priest. And this slide captures that radical shift perfectly. On one side, you have the old system, temporary, repetitive, and flawed because it was run by humans. On the other side, you have the new reality in Jesus, an eternal priest whose one perfect sacrifice was enough for all time. The entire dynamic changes. And this wasn't some new idea pulled out of thin air. It was prophesied centuries earlier in the Psalms. This phrase, "you are a priest forever," was a promise of a completely different kind of priesthood, one that was permanent and could never fail. So Jesus' death on the cross became the ultimate fulfillment of the need for a sacrifice. It was the one, final, perfect offering that made the whole old system of animal sacrifices obsolete. The problem of sin, which the old system could only put a Band-Aid on, was now healed once and for all. Okay, so if Jesus is the one true high priest, what does that mean for us? Does that mean we just sit back and do nothing? Absolutely not. In fact, it leads to a radically new understanding of service that applies to everyone. This brings us to a revolutionary concept, the priesthood of all believers. This means the barrier is gone. Every single Christian is called to serve God directly without needing a special class of people to mediate for them. Because Jesus is the one mediator, every believer now has a priestly calling. And this completely flips the script on the motivation for our service. We're no longer working to say sorry for our sins. That job is finished. Now our service, our work, our very lives become our way of saying thank you for the perfect sacrifice Jesus already made. It's not about earning God's favor, it's about responding to it with gratitude. So this brings us full circle. We've gone from the problem of contempt in the old priesthood to the calling for all believers in the new one.
So, what does this actually mean for you and me right now?
Malachi's challenge echoes through the centuries and lands right at our feet. As part of this new universal priesthood, how do we avoid the same trap? How do we keep our service from becoming a chore, from developing that same tired contempt the priests of old felt?
Let's make this personal. First, where is your temple? What specific calling has God given you in your family, your job, your community? Second, how can you be honest when that service feels hard, without letting it sour into contempt? It's about finding what brings you joy in the middle of the work. And finally, thinking about the priest's role as guides. How can your life and your service act as a signpost for others? So we'll end with this final thought. Your service isn't about some ancient ritual with animals. It's about how you live your life today as an offering of gratitude. So the question isn't if you're called to serve, but how. What is your service right now in your life?